Yeah, I'm Angie Jones. I'm the head of developer relations at Block. And today I'm going to share how we scaled MCP across our entire 12,000 person company in only 2 months. But let me start from the beginning. So Block was organized by business units, meaning each of our brands, Square, Cash App, Tidal, all of these operated as like their own separate companies. And last year we reorged by functional areas. So that means like all of engineering is sitting together now. As you can imagine, this introduced some challenges, right? Each engineering group was used to doing things their own way. They had their own systems of working. So in an effort to like streamline the developer experience, the onboarding to new tools and stuff like that, one of our principal machine learning engineers, Bradley Axon, set out to create a tool that would go beyond just copying and pasting from ChatGPT. And he wanted something that could automate like complex development tasks for our folks. So Brad started tinkering on a developer agent that could actually do things, not just generate code snippet. And y'all, this was before LLMs were supported like function calling and stuff. So as you can imagine, this was a really difficult task. But once OpenAI introduced these capabilities, everything changed. So Brad and a small team of volunteers around the company, they began experimenting with using tool calls to automate parts of the development flow. And while this definitely made things more feasible, we quickly realized that without a standard, creating toolkits is what we call them. I guess that's akin to like an MCP server, but creating toolkits for like all of the various APIs that we needed to integrate with, this was like impossible to scale. So we started working on a protocol, but we're a fintech company, right? We're not like an AI company. So we shared the protocol with our friends over at Anthropic and asked them what they thought. And they're like, dude, we already on it. And so they showed us the MCP spec. We loved it. We immediately aligned with it, and we began rebuilding our agent as an MCP client and became a launch partner. So our client, you may have heard it in numerous talks today, is called Goose. Oh, I forgot to click the thing. Goose. So initially we designed Goose for our own internal engineers. So we added a few built-in MCP servers like Git, JetBrains, memory, a computer controller, you know, the basic necessities. 75% of the engineers who use Goose were saving about 8 to 10 hours a week just by offloading like their busy work to Goose. Within 1 month, adoption doubled, and this was without like a formal rollout campaign or anything like that. People just saw other engineers using it, finishing their tasks quicker. They wanted to try it as well. And as more use cases emerged, weekly engagement grew by 50%. So with all of these efficiency gains, we decided to open source Goose. The public release went really well. In addition to coverage in like major tech publications, Goose was trending on Twitter, #1 on GitHub trending. And so with all of this buzz, the rest of the company kind of found out about it. So the non-engineering team started asking like, what about us? You know, can we be efficient? Can Goose help us? So of course, we want all of our employees to move at the pace that engineering was moving. So we realized that Goose couldn't just be a developer agent. It needed to be a general purpose agent that anyone at the company could use regardless of their technical background. Now, while we were assessing this, our employees, they couldn't wait. They started downloading it anyway. They really wanted to get their hands dirty. So they used Goose as is, and all of a sudden we had sales, legal, marketing, finance, design, product, customer service, like our executive assistants, everybody was trying to use Goose. Naturally, they ran into a few challenges. So the first challenge was with missing MCP servers. Like I said, we built like developer-centric MCP servers because that was our target audience. Now, all of a sudden, people wanted MCPs for tools like Jira and Snowflake and, my God, Google Workspace, so that they could interact with their emails and their calendars and their Google Drives. And they were out in the Wild Wild West, like the rest of us, trying to find MCP servers for their use cases. Once they would find a server that met their needs, then they'd run into the challenge of trying to install this server, right? So y'all know what the GitHub repos look like. It's like a JSON blob or maybe like a NPM command. So they're like, WTF, you know, like what am I supposed to do with this? If they did happen to figure that part out, then they'd be prompted for API keys, which was a foreign concept for a lot of folks. So it was clear that we needed to pause and rethink the experience if we wanted everyone to benefit from this. So how do you make an agent work for 12,000 employees across every function? Here's how we did it. So before we even rolled Goose out to the rest of the company, there were a couple of things that we just accidentally got right. So these were choices that we made for developers that ended up being perfect for everyone else as well. So the alpha version of Goose was CLI only. Dagger, you saw the guy from Dagger with the CLI version, right? So we rebuilt it. When we rebuilt it as an MCP client, we kept CLI, but then we also added a desktop app. And again, this was just for like developer preference, but this ended up completely unlocking everyone else. Goose is also LLM agnostic, so it isn't tied to just one model. And that flexibility turned out to be critical because models like Claude are great for developers, but for other folks who are in other disciplines who need more kind of reasoning or other types of tasks, then they prefer things like GPT-4o or something like that. Internally, we use Databricks as our model host. So this allows employees to choose from OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Meta providers, Olama even for local models. And this gives people the power to like choose, and doing that made adoption much easier across the different disciplines. And what we really love about this approach is that it balances that optionality with control. So we only expose models that perform well on our Goose benchmarks, right? We don't want people to struggle. I just had a flashback to a model I tried yesterday that was, yeah. But when a new model hits the benchmark bar, we can automatically just flip a switch and we can release that to the entire org. We also pre-select a recommended model, and that's the one that's gonna like consistently hit 100 on our benchmark test. Also, let's say like there's an outage or something like that with a model and everybody's using that, we can easily just kind of switch it behind the scenes to something else, but most of the times before people will even notice that something's wrong. So those were the things that we got right, but of course there were plenty of things that did not scale so gracefully. For example, we thought that installing Goose was pretty dead simple, like you download a zip file, you unzip it, you drag, you know, the little application to the application folder and you're done. But for tech employees who aren't tech savvy, sometimes that even caused a bit of friction. Some people never unzipped the file, or others, you know, didn't move it to the right folder, and almost no one kept the app updated. So that meant they were running into bugs that we fixed like 2 releases ago, you know? So we changed course here. We added Goose. I think this was like the most brilliant thing. We added Goose to our internal managed software center, and we also auto install and auto update it on every employee's computer. So if you have a block laptop, you automatically just have Goose, the latest version, already installed, and it just works. The next big hurdle was getting everyone the MCP servers that they needed. So running the npx commands for code that you don't understand is, of course, a security risk, especially for folks that are outside of engineering and can't necessarily like analyze the code. So it just wasn't safe to send them out to like GitHub repos and things like that to pull a server off the internet and install it locally. So what we did here was spun up like a small task team to build the internal servers that people needed. And they learned fast, and because they were working as like this group, they were able to like really crank them out really quickly. We even developed a playbook. That's another talk for another day. But the timing of all of this was perfect because it happened right around our internal hack week. So this made space for like other engineers who had been hearing about MCP, but they don't work on the AI team, but they wanted to get their hands dirty and try it out. They could join this little cohort and hack for a week. So by the end of that week, we had over 60 internal MCP servers ready to go. All of them are now bundled with our internal Goose by default. So no one has to install anything. They just toggle on what they need. So we don't really use external servers now in-house. Even if one exists, we recreate it. And that's not because we don't necessarily trust the open source ones, but more so we need that full control over authentication, versioning, stuff like that. So one of my favorite moments from this phase was a non-engineer. Actually, we didn't even know she was a non-engineer, but she comes in a Slack channel and she's vibe coded her own MCP server for a tool she wants. And she's like, hey, y'all, I have this server, add it to Goose. And we're like, oh, here's the GitHub link. And she's like, oh, I don't have a GitHub account. I'm not an engineer. And so we look at her role and like, oh my God, I just thought that was amazing. But even though we have the 60 plus MCP servers, there's always requests pretty much every day for more. Sometimes they go out in the wild, wild west, again, looking for what they need. And as you can imagine, this freaks our InfoSec team out. So to keep things secure, we developed an allow list internally. So if someone tries to install a server that is not on that allow list, then Goose will block the install. So this is like a simple, effective safeguard that keeps our employees secure. So we got Goose automatically installed. We got 60 plus MCP servers. What could possibly go wrong? The context window. So employees were enabling every server, just in case. And with so many tools enabled, Goose was sending every server's tool description with every prompt to the LLM. And of course, that was causing like a slower response time if you got a response at all. Depending on the model, all that noise would eat up the entire context window. Sometimes before they could even enter their prompt, they're already out of the space. So we needed to make Goose smarter here, and we added dynamic context management that enables and disables MCP servers based on what the user is asking for. For example, if someone wants to pull tasks from Asana and then add them to their calendar, Goose only enables the Asana MCP server, and the Google Calendar MCP server turns everything else off. So that change alone saved a ton of context space, but people love a lengthy conversation. So we couldn't stop there. We also had to build a context summarizer. So once a conversation gets close to the limit, Goose is going to automatically summarize what's happened so far and then continue the session with that summary in place. So this allows the user to like stay in flow and keeps the model performant. Just recently, we also added a context progress bar so users can see when they're getting close to that limit as well. So the next hurdle we desperately had to overcome was authentication. So for non-engineers being prompted for like API keys, tokens, scopes, like too overwhelming. So they were getting stuck on the OAuth approval flows, which caused frustration and a lot of help requests. So today, all of our internal MCP servers are set up to use OAuth with short-lived credentials, and they're integrated right with our identity partner. I don't remember which talk it was this morning, but it kind of talked a little bit about, I think it might have been David's, talked about like, you know, how you can integrate with your identity provider. That's what we do. So no one needs to manage API keys. Like all of that is extracted away from them. When someone toggles on a server that requires authentication, then they'll be prompted with an SSO flow in the browser. So they sign in with their black credentials, approve the access, that's it. This is quick, it's secure. Most importantly, it's familiar to them. So this gives us like all the security and traceability we need. And honestly, it's been really nice for us engineers as well. So solving the technical challenges was one thing, but helping people actually use Goose was another. So we set up 2 dedicated Slack channels, and don't skip over this part because this is important for adoptability. So once one of the Slack channels is to report bugs, ask questions, basically get help, request any features. We don't have like a dedicated support team, so everybody just jumps in. Anybody who works on Goose, you might answer somebody's question, or if you're like a power user. So it's very much so kind of a Discord vibe there. I can't overemphasize how critical that's been to adoption. And then the other Slack channel is for inspiration. So this is a space, somebody's vibe coded something cool, they throw it in there. They've like automated a task, they throw it in there. They talk about like how many hours they saved and all of this. So people see like the sales guy vibe coding a solution for his customers, like you can't help but stand, right? So yeah, Slack, huge role in building the culture around Goose and MCP. Now, Slack gave people a place to connect, but we knew we needed education as well. So we set up internal developer relations initiatives where every week we're hosting brown bag sessions, workshops, office hours, all focused on AI enablement. These are open to everyone across the company. For folks that are brand new to AI, we might do sessions like, you know, prompting 101. And then we'll do more advanced sessions for folks who need a little bit more. How do I build an MCP server, for example? Our DevRel team also offers like tailored workshops at different teams offsites. Like we'll travel and go and help teams figure out like what they can automate and stuff like that. This has been a huge unlock for folks, and it's pretty exciting to see how the non-techies use agents. I gotta say they're more creative than the engineers. Here's a few impactful ways that we've seen employees use MCP. So we use Snowflake as our cloud data platform. So by connecting Goose to Snowflake, MCP employees can query that data in natural language instead of like writing SQL or going to a business intelligence team or something like that. One employee used this MCP to detect fraud by spotting suspicious patterns in transaction history. An employee needed to analyze a data set over 81,000 sales leads and figure out how to distribute them across different sales programs. So they used Goose with a Databricks MCP. She accessed the lead data, refined the logic in plain language, and then landed on clear recommendations that were backed by data. This would have taken her days of manual analysis. It took her just 1 hour. In her own words, this was so helpful, I could cry. And then our PagerDuty MCP, fan favorite in-house. So when you're paged, you're usually in firefighting mode. You're focused on fixing that one issue in that moment. And it's rare to have like the time or the headspace to kind of zoom out and figure out, is this like a recurrent pattern or something like that? So with this MCP, an employee used it to analyze incident data and was able to like uncover the top recurring issues that were triggering alerts. And with that bird's eye view, you know, take actions and eliminate like the root cause and stuff like that. So we're seeing all sorts of powerful use cases across design, customer service, project management, and engineering as well. And seeing what people were building with Goose was inspiring, but it also showed us where the experience needed to evolve. So we started adding features to support the way people actually wanted to work. So employees were automating tasks that weren't just useful for them, but could speed up work for their entire team. But there was no way to share those workflows, so we built a recipe feature that packages up the MCP servers, the goals, the activities from a given session, and turns it into like a little mini agent that others can launch with a single click. This is very popular. Also, non-engineers use Goose to vibe code prototypes in internal tools, but these were stuck on their laptops. So they wanted to share these applications with other employees, but they didn't know how to deploy an app, right? So we created an MCP that deploys static web apps, and this gives people a direct path from idea to deployed app. They don't have to open infra tickets and stuff like that. And then being able to work with the everyday tools is great, but there were frequent questions about how to use Goose to navigate internal processes like procurement, compliance, onboarding, things that traditionally require like that tribal knowledge or something that's like lost in a Slack channel somewhere. So we developed an MCP server for Glean, which specializes in searching enterprise data. And this particular one, this helped me out just last week when I needed to pay like a sponsorship. That was that weekend, and our procurement process is so slow. So I was like, yo, Goose, how do I do this? Like, it's an emergency, I gotta get it done. And it was, I swear, it was like, lean in and whisper, like, you're gonna hit this dude up, and then you're gonna, oh, you want me to open a ticket? Yes, Goose. All right, so MCP is helping thousands of employees across Block work smarter, work faster, work more autonomously. And while most of the buzz that we're seeing in the industry is from developers, we've scaled MCP to over 15 job functions. In the last 2 months, we've learned how to scale AI responsibly and, more importantly, inclusively. So this isn't just a side project for us anymore. It's not an indie experiment for Brad. Block is putting MCP into practice at scale and shaping what this could look like for enterprise companies. If you have questions, I'd be more than happy to chat at the break. Thanks so much.